Yeah, so the main thing I really wanted to cover today is sort of after we've finished this flow, right? So we've built these 3 steps that take the electoral college and map it, and then this was looking at the outstanding states that had yet to declare. But after this, what do we do with it? And so some of the things I really want to go into are within settings. So you'll see this slew of different options. And if we think about the options to present as either asynchronous or synchronous, those are sort of the 2 main things to think about. So if we think about the asynchronous experience, what we could do is actually embed this flow into a website itself. And so if I go to like the UNDP website as an example of this, if we click into one of the flows, what you'll see is that it looks like a normal website, and that's on that page is an embedded flow that you can start to click through. And so that's one modality that's asynchronous. And related to this asynchronous form of communication is this overlay text. So this text that goes on top of it, which allows you to tell a narrative or tell the story when you're not there to really present it. And so with that overlay text, it's something you can toggle on and off, so that if you are presenting live in person, that synchronous experience, you don't really want this text overlay to be on top of something you're also narrating over. And so it's that sort of optionality, I think that's important. Some of the other attributes here, one is enabling phone AR. So that's been really popular for us lately, is actually going into our phones and recording it in AR mode, where we can then post videos of us walking through the content. Actually, just this past week or yesterday, I recorded a video for Spectrum One News that's going to be airing, I think, this weekend or next week, which is kind of exciting. But it's essentially, the ability to then host essentially this is sort of a blend of synchronous and asynchronous, where the meeting itself is synchronous, where what I'm doing is actually capturing this by having 2 phones in the same scene, where we're in a multi-user meeting together, and I'm progressing forward the presentation using the phone I'm holding. And you'll notice that you can actually see this line coming out of my phone once this update. Yeah, and that line is actually, because we're in a multi-user meeting, it knows where all the objects are in the space. And so it's actually tracking. It's not tracking the image. It's actually my phone is talking to the server, and that server is then updating the visual on this other phone, which is then being recorded, which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool. And so the actual recording of it, though, I think is a really powerful piece to be able to share and to be able to generate some virality and some interest in what you're presenting. And so that's the other attribute that I think is important for this asynchronous aspect of presentation. And then when it comes to the actual presentation that's synchronous, we have this button that is Show Meeting Invite button. And so if I quickly open this flow, what you'll see is that the very bottom left-hand corner, when I have that checkbox enabled, this allows you to host a meeting. And so just by clicking it, it actually changes the URL, and that's now a multi-user link, which I then can send to all of you. And usually I put that in the chat window, and then you can also join in the flow itself. Now, when it comes to presenting, there's 2 options to that presentation. One option is to have avatars showing, so I can see other people in the scene along with me, or I can disable avatars. And you might want to enable avatars where you do actually want people to interact and be able to see what they're looking at. But if you think about like you're presenting to 100 people, right? You don't really necessarily want 100 avatars floating around, and that really you want them just to have a very fluid, smooth movements of the camera and the animations and all of that. So you can still host this meeting, right? So I'm still hosting this meeting right now. And if you follow this link into the chat window, you actually will be part of the meeting, but your avatar won't be visible. And so that's another way to basically share without sharing your screen in some sense. Now, there is some additional thing that we're experimenting with on this synchronous front, which is what I'm doing right now a little bit, which is how do I present my video feed, or how do I use my video feed to actually present the flow itself. And we've actually taken it one step further, which is this little button that says purpose is AR video. And so if I click that button and save this, when I now load this flow up, it's going to load the exact same way, but now there's no invite button. The buttons here are actually very dark now. And the reason being is that I can now use OBS to actually Luma key this out. And by Luma keying it out, I now have this as an object that I can manipulate while I'm presenting it to you in this through my video feed. So this is sort of like the news broadcaster look and feel of presentation. And that's essentially how we enable it, is through that additional setting within settings. So I've covered a lot of ground here in terms of the different modalities. So asynchronous for sending it out the link to embedding it onto a website, even just emailing out the link itself that you're going to grab from this share link right here. I guess one thing I didn't touch upon is that you can click on this get sharing link if you want to maintain this flow to be private, so it's not published flow, but you can share this link, which is a very longer hex code, which allows you to share this privately with someone. And then lastly, you can also share by putting in the person's email address for anyone that's registered on the flow itself. So let me just click through here and just make sure I covered everything here. So some of the other things that we've used to focus more on is like scrollable, which now that we've enabled orbit controls is a little less used. But it used to be that when you swiped up on your phone, it would swipe you to the next step in a really smooth and dynamic way. We don't do that quite as often anymore, but we can go into that to go through those settings. And then just to quickly cover it, just so you have a complete history here, and I'll post this little segment as well, sort of talking through all these online so you can refer to it. This scale button, this scales the whole scene, so every scene or every step that you see will scale appropriately. So if you've made everything way too big or way too small and you're trying to record this AR video and you want to basically adjust everything, you can adjust the scale here. By default, we actually increase everything by 3 times going into VR, because in VR you typically don't want sort of smaller objects, but actually it helps to see things really large. And so we automatically do that, but you can adjust that down or up as necessary. And these other attributes, so for mobile AR, you want to set the height, and right now it looks at what is the center point. So 0, 0, 0 is the center point of the scene, and then from there, how much should I bring it up or down? Oops, I'm not sharing my screen right. Sorry. How much should I share or bring the scene up or down from wherever I set the position? And so typically you set that position on the floor. We also have this attribute for setting it on the table. I'm pretty sure they read actually almost the same, except if the table is quite high. But it's essentially off of that index or that reference field, how high up will the scene load? And so if you want things to lay flat on the table, you'll basically adjust this attribute. So a lot of different settings here that we sort of went through. This last piece is sidebar details. I'll just quickly show that as well. So if you type something in there, when I load this back up, and let me turn off AR video, I'll turn on multi-user. And let me refresh this. Right. And if I can actually have you guys jump in as well on this flow. So the sidebar details, you'll see that we have this, what I just typed basically right here. And then when you're in the synchronous mode, so when we're all in the scene together, we can actually, if you want to turn off someone's avatar or you don't want everyone to be visible, the administrator, which is represented by this little chess icon, if you click on this button, which is this little eyeball, I can turn off. So in this case, I just turned off Tyler's avatar, or I can turn off Joseph's avatar, or participant 1 for someone who just logged in. And so that's one way to start to control who is visible in the scene and who is not. So if you just want everyone to focus on just a certain number of presenters, that's a quick way to do it. In addition, you can actually pass administrator rights. So right now, when I click the next button, it progresses forward for everyone. But right now, I can switch presenters to Tyler. So I just changed this so I no longer see the next and back buttons, but Tyler, you should see it on your screen. And so now when you click forward and back, it adjusts for everyone else. And so this is another sort of thing that you do within the sidebar here to get going.
Is that only one person with administrative control at a time?
Yes.
Hosting?
Yeah, one person with presenter rights at a time. But
Yeah.
I believe myself as the person that hosted the meeting will always be able to pass the ball essentially to someone else.
Gotcha.
So if I pass it to someone and they are not there anymore, I can just pass it back to myself or pass it to someone else. And then lastly, I also have this share button, which pops up the same QR code for people to join on their phone, as well as that URL, or you can actually type in their email addresses and have it send an invite to come to that meeting right away. We're still working on the functionality to have a meeting persist for longer. Right now, if no one's in the meeting for more than 30 minutes, that the meeting will close. So that just makes it a little more difficult if we're trying to schedule a meeting out, that you sort of need to create the meeting instance right before the meeting as opposed to setting it up like a week in advance or something. And then lastly is just this end button. So I'll click this and I'm going to kick everyone out. And so that ends the meeting for everyone. And then we're back to where we started. So anyways, that should be everything. The only other thing is, orbit controls. So that's the main modality where, you're clicking and dragging and you're able to scan through based on the center point of the scene. You can use the origin as center point, which is what's recommended. If you don't check that box, it actually calculates the center point based on the objects in the scene to figure out where is that center, and then it will use that as the center point, which sometimes is helpful, but sometimes can be problematic depending on if you have where you put objects. But so that's relevant there. And that this max zoom in distance especially is applicable when you have a globe and you want people to be able to get close to the globe, like zoom into the globe, but you don't want them to go through the globe and get into the middle of it. So this prevents you from going all the way to the origin, essentially. So that is sort of me covering sort of the different modalities. And so what I was imagining here, and I'll stop this recording so